Welcome to Exhibition. And hello, Jasper Knight.
Hi, Richard. Very nice to be here.
Great to see you there. And your exhibition is titled Downtown Shutdown at James Macon Gallery in Melbourne. And we have to ask about the title first of all. It seems to be a COVID reference, but where did it come from?
Well, yes, you're right. It is a COVID reference, but it's actually a title of a song, a track by some friends of mine who are in a electronic act, and I just really liked that track, and I just thought, look, it's perfect. Even though it's a very upbeat bit of music, it has obviously a little bit more of a sinister meaning to me at the moment.
Let's go to the business of your works. And your practice for many years has produced works which have largely very clear delineated forms with very strong areas of colour often. How did that language evolve over the years?
That's a good question. I always loved drawing, you know. That's what I started doing when I was 5 or 6. I just was drawing on everything, drawing on scrap bits of paper, always very heavy black pencil or, charcoal. And that developed into, I've always viewed my paintings as big drawings. Like the black outlines are very, very much remind me of that. It's one of them all. And then I fell into the assemblage side of things when I went to university. So I remember being at the College of Fine Arts, and like behind so many great artists is a great teacher. And I had a really good teacher, and he said, "Your work's about surface. Don't worry. Back then, you were worried to call yourself an artist, But back when you were at uni, I was nervous even saying I was an artist. So he almost like unlocked this passion and confidence in me. He said, "Don't worry about what you're painting. Just worry about have fun with the surface." And everything changed from that point on.
One of the elements that you've focused on over the years, or which has occurred and recurred over the years, are vehicles of various sorts, forms of function or transport, whether they've been motor scooters, or in the case of this exhibition, there are various vehicles, but there's the Ford 6600 tractor, for example. Tell us about the focus on vehicles.
Once again, I've always been drawing and vehicles. I'm kind of obsessed with cars. I've owned many, many cars over my time, and I kind of, fell into painting them. I love painting them. I love the shape. I love the form. I love the gloss color. To me, they represent freedom and movement and all these kind of things. And there are certain vehicles that I just love, and I come back to time and time again for, I guess, inspiration. And I've made several works of the Ford 6600, like I have of like a Chevy in the Cuban car series. And I just fall in love with these certain vehicles, and that found its way into this show.
You mentioned the idea of surface in your paintings, and one of the things, as well as surface, that often happens is a sense of structure. There are very strong forms that the painting is based around, and sometimes that structural essence distills to an almost Mondrian-like grid. And I'm thinking of the work Underneath the Wild Mouse in this exhibition. How do you find that balance between structure and then paint form?
Well, just through experimentation. That's how I find the balance. Like that particular work is almost just a grid of wooden timber, and it's that work started off its life quite monotone. It was just it was a tonal study of greys and green greys and black, and but I wasn't happy with it. So then colour slowly crept in, and that changed the structure of it. More drips came, and then I find with that comes energy. Do you know what I mean? If things are too structured with my work, they don't work, and if they're too planned, they don't work.
Just going to the title of that particular work, Underneath the Wild Mouse, can you tell us where you were?
I was underneath the wild mouse, which is, I've made several paintings of the wild mouse. I love the roller coaster, the wild mouse, at Sydney's Luna Park. And there's also a similar one in Melbourne, not called the wild mouse, but a wooden structured roller coaster. And I just have always been fascinated by how dangerous they seem, and but how beautiful they are, and that's where I was when I don't paint outside. I'm not a plein air painter, so I didn't. It's not like I set up my easel and made that painting under the wild mouse whilst people walk by with fairy floss. I took a series of photos, and then I did it back in the studio, because needless to say, when there's all those drips, there's a lot of paint on the floor.
This exhibition incorporates elements of what seems perhaps to be a relatively new direction for you, mistier, more tonal works with less graphic delineation, less really strong colour. What's happening in that new direction?
About 3 or 4 years ago, I started to break free from that kind of work I was talking about previously, the big drawings and lots of series of cars and only primary colours. And suddenly I've been just using just one colour in paintings, and lots of tonal differences within that colour. And it's been liberating, it's been exciting for me and I've done away with black in a lot of paintings. It's too heavy, and I've moved to canvas. So in some respects, it feels like more traditional painting, but the outcome is not. They seem more abstract, and I guess not. For me, they're much more intelligent in some respects than the old painting. I still love the old work, and it's part of me. But this seems very exciting for me, at least.
You use the word liberating in describing it, and yet your palette is so much more restricted. How do you strike the balance between restriction and liberation?
I find it liberating because I will literally just open a tin of blue and say, painting wet on wet, how can I make this into a painting? I'll open some white, I'll open some, I'll even get old paint, like from just lying around that I've painted other paintings with, and be dipping the brush in. And so I'm only using one brush and trying to make a painting. And for me, that's really very, very liberating, because there's no structure, whether it's only blue or red. It's almost meditative, in a way that the other ones weren't.
With a work like Northern Charter, where it seems to have gone almost to a full abstraction, you can't quite identify necessarily what it might be.
Yes.
Is that what gives you that liberation, that you're not tied to something that represents anything identifiable?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and but I should point out that all these works have a great meaning to me. They all have a story. That, for example, is of a private charter wharf on the North Shore, where my mother took me, my brother and I, when I was young, to play in a park in front of it every day. And I've made lots of paintings of these beautiful private wharfs made of timber, and so many of the wharfs turning into metal wharfs. So once again, not dissimilar to the wild mouse with its spider web of wood. This is something else that excites me. There's the movement in the water, and yeah, I think painting with just one color and painting fast and wet and with drips and energy and with this new cobalt blue I really love. It's been an exciting new period for me in my practice.
Let's turn to some of those painting materials. And you talk about the drips and the painting fast and discovering new colours. But over the years, there have been some very identifiable materials that you've used, the very glossy enamels and some of the industrial materials that you've painted on.
Mm.
How have you made those choices, and what's appealed to you over the years?
Originally, when I was an art student, and to reference that point about doing my master's, when that teacher said my work's about surface, my first work was on cardboard. I loved it. I could cut back to the corrugation. I could add pieces. I could paint it. I could add packing tape. Of course, none of it's particularly archival, but it was so liberating, and that set a love affair in place with finding materials. And I just thought, if I could find all these materials and make them into my canvas, it's almost like a challenge to take all these things, paint from Bunnings, stuff you find on the street, stuff that might be around the corner from your studio and is quite meaningful to you in a lot of ways. Old bits of, perspex signage, whatever you can find, and put it all together, paint it with this glossy paint, and suddenly it becomes this very luxurious, beautiful, bright work. And really, it has its own history. I always say that I seem to be painting really well when the background does as much painting for me as the brush marks I make. And I really felt like that's what those materials were doing. Mm. They were adding.
And in this exhibition, you are choosing to use core flute. Tell us what that material is as a substrate.
Well, it's a framing material. It's corrugated. It's plastic. It's not really used for making art, and that I know of. And so core flute, I just love the ribs. I love these. If you paint with very watery paint, it just finds the lines and follows them, and it's exciting. It's exciting to do that as opposed to a bit of paper. So I've used this, and these have kind of become my paper works. That's how I view them. They start as a flat white sheet, and they've core flute have become my paper works.
And with works like A Simple Plan, you can see the core flute vertical lines showing through the layers of paint, and that is your intention.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my intention. I want to show that material, and I think it's really important to show that material. And it's not that I'm not concerned with archivalness of my work. I guess I'm one of those artists. I like to use house paint, and I like to use building materials, and that's what I've always done. And I don't find myself buying fine hog hair brushes and oils with mediums from the art stores of Sydney. I find myself at the Dulux Paint Centre and Bunnings and perspex wholesalers and metal workers, and I love that too. That's part of it. And they always ask me what I'm doing with it. My perspex supplier has been the same for 12 years. And they're like, what do you do with all these perspex? And once I showed them, and I was like, I do this. And they just could not believe it. I think they were chuffed, like their works have been in the Archibald and stuff, and they're stoked, they're really proud of it. So yeah, that's nice.
You mentioned a little while back the paint dribbles, the very characteristic Jasper Knight paint dribbles. But how do you find the balance, again, between spontaneous artifact and
Mm.
controlled effect?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I have been called the drip guy before. No one wants to be called the drip guy. So it's just a process of adding and removing, you know, and and like everything, like I talked about before, the process. Like a fine oil painter will start with very thick oil paint and then add mediums to thin it. I'm actually starting with a very thin paint. You know, that paint's made for high coverage and to be high, you know, I guess applied just once or with over 2 days, but I'm using it like it's going to last for weeks and weeks, which means I've got snap lock storage stuff in place, and I have to add. The way that I make it thicker is by letting air in. So the more air you let into those tins, the thicker the paint gets as certain things evaporate. And so if I were to just get enamel paint straight out of a tin and paint it across a canvas, it would literally just bleed out the canvas. And you have to, like everything, there's process. I just get to a level where I guess using those house paints that I'm confident knowing exactly where I stand with it in terms of drips. And I've never cared. Of course, my son thinks that I've made mistakes. He goes, it's great except for all those drips. You have to clean those up. So, you know, what can you do?
Tell us a little about the titles for the works in the show, because there are some intriguing ones like Scoop de Whoop, Tiger King, Let the Sky Fall. How do you find those titles and settle on them?
Often they're references or they're songs or movies or, I mean, I once called a half a show after Arnold Schwarzenegger titles. So for me, I love naming things, but I don't take them, they're not hugely serious, you know? And if my titles aren't literal, like Ford 6600, which is literally the tractor, then, you know, they're going to be, you know, pretty, you know, either movie songs, references, just Tiger King obviously is from the hit series on Netflix, Tiger King, because that particular work has a lot of gold and black on it. So it reminded me, it's a tiger, but it's not, because it's a picture of a bridge in Hong Kong. But I just thought that's going to be called Tiger King. And yeah, and so sometimes I make lists of names. You know, I saw a great list of the great film noirs posted on Instagram like last week, and I screen grabbed it because I just thought, wow, the titles are phenomenal. All these 40s and 50s films, unbelievable. And you know, so that answers my titling. It's either very literal or makes no sense.
Well, it's been great to be able to share your titles, but it's also been great to share your exhibition as a whole. So, Jasper Knight, thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure.